Marcus thought he had lost everything when he discovered his wife Elena and his best friend Jake's affair. What they didn't know was that his struggling handyman business was just a cover, hiding millions in cryptocurrency investments. While they plotted to take what little they thought he had, Marcus was already 10 steps ahead. This is the story of how two people who betrayed him discovered that sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one who holds all the cards. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in late September. Marcus had just finished installing kitchen cabinets for Mrs. Henderson, his hands still dusty from sawdust, when he pulled into his driveway in Portland, Oregon. The house he shared with Elena looked the same as always, a modest two-story colonial with peeling paint that he kept meaning to fix, but something felt different. The living room curtains were drawn shut, which was unusual for Elena. She always loved the afternoon light streaming through those windows. Marcus wiped his boots on the doormat and pushed open the front door. The house was quiet, too quiet. Elena's car was in the driveway, so she had to be home. He called out her name as he set down his toolbox, but got no response. The silence stretched through the hallway, broken only by the distant hum of the refrigerator. He climbed the stairs, each step creaking under his weight. Their bedroom door was slightly ajar, and he could hear the faint sound of Elena's voice. Relief washed over him until he realized she was whispering, her tone urgent and secretive. Marcus paused at the top of the stairs, his hand gripping the banister. Elena's voice carried through the crack in the door. She was talking to someone, but it wasn't the casual conversation of a phone call with her sister or a friend. There was something intimate about the way she spoke, something that made his stomach tighten with unease. Marcus moved closer to the bedroom, his work boots silent on the carpeted hallway. Through the gap in the door, he could see Elena sitting on the edge of their bed, her back to him. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and her free hand was running through her dark hair in that nervous gesture he knew so well. The words he caught made his blood run cold. Elena was speaking in that soft, breathy voice she used to use with him during their early dating days, a voice he hadn't heard directed at him in months. She was talking about missing someone, about wishing they could be together openly. The conversation lasted only a few more minutes before she hung up, but those minutes felt like hours to Marcus. He quickly retreated to the bathroom, running the faucet loudly to announce his presence. When he emerged, Elena was downstairs in the kitchen, acting as if nothing had happened. She greeted him with a smile that seemed forced, asking about his day while avoiding direct eye contact. Marcus went through the motions of normalcy, telling her about the cabinet installation and Mrs. Henderson's 3 cats that had tried to supervise his work, but his mind was racing, replaying Elena's tone, the intimacy in her voice. Who had she been talking to, and why did she feel the need to hide upstairs to make the call? That night, as they lay in bed, Marcus stared at the ceiling while Elena's breathing settled into the rhythm asleep beside him. He thought about their marriage, how they'd met 5 years ago at a coffee shop downtown where Elena worked as a barista while finishing her degree in marketing. He'd been immediately drawn to her quick wit and infectious laugh. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of hiking trips in the Columbia River Gorge, weekend visits to food trucks, and long conversations about their dreams for the future. Marcus had been honest with Elena about his business. He'd told her he was a handyman trying to build something stable, that money was tight, but he was working hard to establish himself. What he hadn't told her, what he'd never told anyone, was about the cryptocurrency investments he'd made years earlier when Bitcoin was still a curiosity to most people. His computer science background from college had given him insights into the technology that others missed, and he'd quietly accumulated a portfolio that was now worth several $1 million. The decision to keep his wealth hidden hadn't been about deception initially. Marcus had seen too many relationships destroyed by money, had watched friends and family members change when they discovered someone's true financial status. He'd wanted Elena to love him for who he was, not what he could provide. As their relationship deepened and then moved toward marriage, the secret had become harder to reveal. How do you tell someone you've been living modestly when you could afford luxury? How do you explain that the struggling handyman persona was a choice, not a necessity? Now, lying in the darkness, listening to Elena's steady breathing, Marcus wondered if his caution had been justified. If Elena was having an affair, was it because she thought he couldn't provide the life she wanted? Was she seeking security and excitement elsewhere because she believed he was just a small-time contractor barely making ends meet? The next morning brought no answers, only more questions.
Elena was unusually cheerful at breakfast, humming while she made coffee and chatting about her plans for the day. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit, a job she'd landed 6 months after their wedding. The tearfulness felt performative to Marcus, like she was overcompensating for something. Marcus left for work that morning with a heavy heart. He had 3 jobs lined up: fixing a leaky roof for an elderly couple, installing shelving in a teenager's bedroom, and replacing a bathroom vanity for a young family. The physical labor usually helped clear his mind, but today every hammer blow and measured cut was accompanied by thoughts of Elena's secret phone call. During his lunch break, Marcus sat in his truck outside a sandwich shop and made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Jake Morrison's number. Jake had been his best friend since college, the best man at his wedding, and someone Marcus trusted completely. If anyone could give him perspective on his marriage concerns, it would be Jake. Jake answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. They chatted for a few minutes about work and weekend plans before Marcus steered the conversation toward relationships. He asked Jake's opinion about marriage, about how couples stay connected after the honeymoon phase ends. Jake's responses were thoughtful and supportive, exactly what Marcus expected from his closest friend. What Marcus didn't expect was the slight hesitation in Jake's voice when he mentioned Elena, a pause that lasted just a beat too long when Marcus asked if Jake thought Elena seemed happy in their marriage. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Marcus caught it. Jake recovered quickly, assuring Marcus that Elena was lucky to have him and that all marriages go through rough patches. The conversation ended with plans to grab beers later that week, but Marcus sat in his truck afterward, feeling more unsettled than before. Jake's hesitation could have been nothing, just a friend being careful not to overstep boundaries in someone else's marriage. But combined with Elena's secretive phone call, it felt like another piece of a puzzle Marcus didn't want to solve. That evening, Elena announced she would be working late for the next few nights. The nonprofit was launching a new fundraising campaign, she explained, and the team needed to put in extra hours to meet their deadline. Her explanation was detailed and believable, complete with mentions of specific donors and budget concerns, but something about the way she delivered it, the slight tension in her shoulders, made Marcus doubt every word.
Job that would keep him out until late. A bathroom renovation that needed to be finished before the homeowners returned from vacation. It was a lie, but he needed to see what Elena would do with an unexpected evening of freedom. Instead of going to a non-existent job, Marcus drove to Jake's apartment complex across town. Jake lived in a modern building with a view of the Willamette River, a place that always made Marcus slightly envious, even though he could afford something much nicer. He parked where he could see the entrance and settled in to wait, hoping his suspicions were wrong but needing to know the truth. 2 hours later, his worst fears were confirmed. Elena's silver Honda pulled into the parking lot, and Marcus watched his wife of 3 years walk confidently toward the building entrance. She moved like someone who belonged there, like someone who had made this trip many times before. She didn't hesitate at the directory or fumble with apartment numbers. She knew exactly where she was going. Marcus sat in his truck feeling like the world had shifted beneath him. His wife and his best friend, the 2 people he trusted most in the world, had been betraying him, and he had no idea how long it had been going on. The cheerful breakfast conversations, the work deadlines, the casual friendship between Jake and Elena that he'd encouraged and celebrated, it had all been an elaborate performance staged for his benefit. The rational part of his mind told him to confront them immediately, to march into that building and demand answers. But something held him back. Maybe it was the years of keeping his own secret, of understanding how easy it was to live a double life. Maybe it was the businessman in him, the part that had learned to gather information before making moves in the cryptocurrency market. Whatever it was, Marcus decided to wait and watch. He drove home to their empty house and sat in his garage workshop, surrounded by the tools of his trade. The handyman business that had started as a cover story had become something he genuinely enjoyed. There was satisfaction in fixing things, in taking something broken and making it work again.
He wondered if his marriage was beyond repair or if there was still something salvageable in the wreckage of his trust. Marcus pulled out his laptop and logged into his cryptocurrency accounts for the first time in weeks. The numbers on the screen showed a portfolio worth just over $4 million, gains from investments he'd made years ago and barely touched since. The money had always been there, a safety net he'd never needed to use. Now he wondered if it might be the key to protecting himself from whatever Elena and Jake were planning. The next morning, Elena was full of stories about her late night at work. She described fictional meetings and imaginary deadlines with the same attention to detail she brought to her actual job. Marcus listened and nodded, playing the role of the supportive husband, while inside he felt sick. How long had she been lying to him? How many of their conversations had been scripted performances? Over the following days, Marcus developed a routine of surveillance that made him feel both powerful and pathetic. He would tell Elena about evening jobs that didn't exist, then follow her to Jake's apartment complex. Sometimes she would arrive within an hour of Marcus leaving. Other times she would make stops first, picking up dinner, buying wine, shopping for lingerie that he never saw her wear at home. The pattern became clear. Elena was living a double life, maintaining the facade of their marriage while conducting a full relationship with Jake. Marcus began to wonder if she was planning to leave him or if she intended to continue the affair indefinitely. Either way, he realized he needed to protect himself. Marcus started documenting everything. He took photos of Elena's car at Jake's apartment complex, noted the times she arrived and left, and kept a careful record of her lies about working late. He also began researching divorce laws in Oregon, learning about asset division and spousal support. What he discovered made him grateful for his.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Hidden wealth and careful that Elena had no idea it existed. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening in October. Marcus had told Elena he was working on a kitchen remodel that would keep him out past midnight. Instead, he parked in his usual surveillance spot and watched Elena arrive at Jake's building around 7 o'clock. But instead of settling in for his usual wait, Marcus decided to try something different. He drove to Elena's workplace, a small office building downtown where the nonprofit rented space on the 3rd floor. If Elena was really pulling long hours for a fundraising campaign, there should be signs of activity in the office. But when Marcus walked past the building, the 3rd floor was completely dark. There was no campaign, no urgent deadline, no team working late into the night. Marcus stood on the sidewalk looking up at the dark windows and felt the last of his illusions crumble. Elena wasn't just having an affair, she was living in a completely fabricated reality. Every detail of her work story was a lie, designed to give her cover for spending time with Jake. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd thought he knew, was a stranger. That night, when Elena came home with stories of spreadsheets and donor calls, Marcus felt something inside him harden. He responded to her lies with sympathy and encouragement, playing the supportive husband while plotting his next move. If Elena wanted to live in a world of deception, he could play that game better than she knew. The following week, Marcus began implementing a plan that would have impressed his cryptocurrency trading mentors. He started moving his digital assets through a series of transactions designed to make them harder to trace. He opened new accounts, purchased privacy coins, and created layers of financial complexity that would take a forensic accountant months to unravel. If Elena was planning to divorce him and take half of everything, she would be disappointed to discover that everything she knew about consisted of a modest checking account, some tools, and a truck with high mileage. Marcus also began documenting his income as a handyman more carefully. He raised his rates slightly and started taking on more jobs, creating a paper trail that showed a man working hard to improve his family's financial situation. To anyone looking at his taxes or bank statements, he would appear to be exactly what he claimed, a small business owner trying to build something stable. The irony wasn't lost on him. While Elena was lying to him about her evenings, he was constructing a lie about their entire financial future. The difference was that his deception was self-protection,
a response to her betrayal rather than the cause of it. Marcus found himself studying Elena with new eyes, looking for clues about her motivations and plans. She seemed genuinely affectionate at times, kissing him goodbye in the mornings and curling up against him at night. But there were moments when she seemed distant, lost in thoughts he couldn't access. He wondered if she was comparing him to Jake, if she was planning her exit strategy, or if she was simply enjoying the thrill of living a secret life. Jake, meanwhile, continued to be the perfect friend whenever they interacted. He called Marcus regularly, suggested hangouts, and even asked about Elena's well-being with what seemed like genuine concern. The performance was flawless, which made it even more disturbing. Marcus began to understand that both Elena and Jake were skilled manipulators, people who could compartmentalize their betrayal while maintaining normal relationships with their victim. The situation reached a turning point in early November. Marcus had been maintaining his surveillance routine for several weeks when he noticed a change in Elena's behavior. She was staying out later, sometimes not returning home until after midnight. Her stories about work became more elaborate, involving weekend conferences and networking events that Marcus couldn't verify. More troubling was Elena's new interest in their finances. She began asking questions about their joint
accounts, suggesting they should consolidate their money for easier management. She proposed that they meet with a financial advisor to plan for their future, mentioning children and house upgrades with an enthusiasm that seemed forced. Marcus realized that Elena was laying groundwork for something bigger than an affair. She was positioning herself to understand and access his assets before making her next move. The timing suggested that she and Jake were planning to end their secret relationship and begin an open one, which would require dissolving her marriage to Marcus. That weekend, Elena announced that she'd been offered a promotion at work that would require occasional travel. The opportunity was too good to pass up, she explained, even though it would mean spending some nights away from home. Marcus nodded supportively, while internally marveling at the creativity of her lies. There was no promotion, no travel, no opportunity beyond more time with Jake. Marcus decided it was time to accelerate his own timeline. He began liquidating some of his cryptocurrency holdings, converting them to more traditional investments held in accounts Elena couldn't access. He also started documenting Elena's absences more carefully, building a case that would be useful if their marriage ended in court. The breakthrough Marcus had been waiting for came on a rainy Tuesday in late November. He'd been following Elena to Jake's apartment when he saw something that changed everything. Jake was in the building's parking lot when Elena arrived, and instead of their usual discreet reunion inside, they embraced openly next to their cars. More importantly, Marcus could see Jake's lips moving as he spoke passionately to Elena, gesturing in a way that suggested important news. Marcus couldn't hear what they were discussing, but their body language told a story of excitement and planning. Elena's responses were animated, and she kept touching Jake's arm in a possessive way that spoke of claimed intimacy. When they finally went inside, Marcus knew he'd witnessed a significant moment in their relationship. The next morning confirmed his suspicions. Elena was unusually quiet at breakfast, distracted in a way that suggested major decisions were weighing on her mind. She kept checking her phone and seemed to be composing and deleting text messages. When Marcus asked if everything was okay, she blamed stress at work and promised things would calm down soon. Marcus knew that Elena was preparing to make her move. Whether it was divorce papers, a demand for financial disclosure, or simply an announcement that she was leaving, something was coming. He could feel it in the tension that had settled over their house like fog, in the way Elena looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. That afternoon, while Elena was at her real job, Marcus made a decision that would define everything that followed. He drove to the office of a private investigator he'd researched online, a former police detective named Sarah Chen, who specialized in matrimonial cases. If Elena and Jake were planning something that would require legal proof of their relationship, Marcus wanted documentation that would be admissible in court. Sarah listened to Marcus's story with professional detachment, taking notes and asking questions that revealed the depth of Elena's deception. When Marcus showed her photos he'd taken of Elena's car at Jake's apartment complex, Sarah nodded approvingly. The evidence was good,
But she recommended additional surveillance to establish a pattern and capture more intimate proof of the affair. Marcus hired Sarah that afternoon, authorizing her to conduct professional surveillance for the next 2 weeks. The cost was substantial, but Marcus had the resources to afford the best. If Elena was planning to destroy their marriage, he would be ready with evidence that would protect his interests. The waiting became harder after hiring Sarah. Marcus knew that professionals were now documenting his wife's betrayal with cameras and GPS tracking, building a case that would be useful if their marriage ended in court.
Case that would soon be presented to him in a neat folder. He continued his own routine of fake jobs and surveillance, but now he was gathering intelligence rather than simply confirming his suspicions. Elena's behavior grew more erratic as November turned to December. She was frequently distracted, often forgetting conversations they'd had or plans they'd made. She would start to say something about work, then stop mid-sentence and change the subject. Most tellingly, she began asking about Marcus's holiday schedule, specifically when he might have time off or be traveling to visit family. Marcus realized that Elena was planning to use the holiday season for something significant. Maybe she intended to spend Christmas with Jake, or perhaps she was planning to serve Marcus with divorce papers after the new year. Either way, her questions about his availability suggested she was coordinating with someone else's schedule. The revelation came sooner than Marcus expected. On a Friday morning in mid-December, Sarah called with an update that changed everything. Her surveillance team had captured video of Elena and Jake apartment hunting in an upscale neighborhood across town. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a life together. Sarah's evidence was comprehensive and damning. Video showed Elena and Jake touring luxury condominiums, holding hands as they discussed floor plans and amenities. Audio captured conversations about lease terms and move-in dates. Most devastating of all, Sarah had recorded a phone call in which Elena discussed her plans to divorce Marcus after the holidays, expressing confidence that she would receive a substantial settlement that would help fund her new life with Jake. Marcus listened to Sarah's report, feeling a mixture of vindication and devastation. He'd been right about the affair, but hearing Elena discuss their marriage as a financial transaction to be liquidated was more painful than he'd anticipated. The woman he'd loved had been calculating their relationship in terms of dollars and assets while planning her escape to a better life. But there was something Elena and Jake didn't know, something that would turn their careful plans into a disaster of their own making. As Marcus sat in Sarah's office looking at photographs of his wife shopping for new homes with another man, he realized that his hidden wealth was about to become the ultimate protection against their betrayal. The evidence Sarah had gathered showed that Elena and Jake were planning their new life based on assumptions about Marcus's limited income and modest assets. They'd calculated their future budget around the settlement Elena expected to receive from divorcing a small-time handyman with little money and few possessions. They had no idea that the man they were betraying had resources that could make their lives very difficult if he chose to use them. Marcus left Sarah's office that afternoon with a plan forming in his mind. Elena want to play games with deception and manipulation? He would show her what a real master of hidden information could accomplish. She thought she was leaving a poor handyman for a better life. She was about to discover that sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one holding all the power. The game was about to change, and Marcus intended to win. The week before Christmas brought an unexpected gift that Marcus never could have anticipated. Elena came home from what she claimed was her last day at work before the holiday break, but her demeanor was different. There was an energy about her, a barely contained excitement that she was trying to mask with casual conversation about holiday plans and family visits. Marcus was in the garage organizing his tools when Elena appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She watched him work for a moment before speaking, her voice carrying a tone he hadn't heard in months. "Marcus, we need to talk about something important," she said, her fingers nervously playing with the hem of her sweater. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our future, about where we're headed as a couple." Marcus set down the wrench he'd been cleaning and turned to face his wife. After weeks of surveillance and documentation, after hiring private investigators and uncovering the depth of her deception, he was finally going to hear Elena's version of their story. He kept his expression neutral, curious but not suspicious. "What kind of thinking?" he asked, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Elena stepped into the garage, her movements calculated and rehearsed. Marcus recognized the signs now, the way she prepared for important conversations like an actress preparing for a performance. She'd probably practiced the speech with Jake, refined it until every word served her purpose.
I think we should consider couples therapy, Elena said, her voice soft and concerned. I feel like we've been drifting apart lately, like we're roommates instead of partners. I want to fix things between us, but I think we need professional help. Marcus studied her face, looking for tells he'd learned to recognize over the past month. The slight tension around her eyes suggested she was monitoring his reaction carefully. The way she stood with her weight shifted toward the door indicated she was prepared to retreat if the conversation didn't go as planned. Therapy, Marcus repeated, letting the word hang in the air between them. That's a big step. What made you think of it? Elena's explanation was carefully crafted, a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as vulnerability. She talked about feeling disconnected from him, about worrying that their financial stress was affecting their relationship. She mentioned wanting children someday but feeling uncertain about their stability as a couple. Every word was designed to position her as the concerned wife trying to save their marriage. Marcus listened to his wife lie to his face with an expertise that took his breath away. Elena wasn't suggesting therapy because she wanted to repair their relationship. She was creating a paper trail, establishing herself as the partner who'd tried to work on their problems before giving up. When she eventually filed for divorce, she would be able to point to this conversation as evidence that she'd made good faith efforts to save their marriage. I think therapy could be good for us, Marcus said finally, his voice thoughtful and supportive. You're right that we've been struggling to connect lately. I want to work on that. Elena's smile became more genuine, relief flooding her features. She'd expected resistance, maybe even suspicion, but Marcus was playing his role perfectly. The financially struggling handyman who wanted to please his wife was responding exactly as she'd hoped. There's something else, Elena continued, her confidence growing. I've been looking at our finances, and I think we need to be more strategic about our money. Maybe we should consolidate our accounts, make it easier to track our spending and saving. There it was. The financial consolidation request that Marcus had been expecting for weeks. Elena wanted access to his accounts, wanted to understand the full scope of their joint assets before she made her next move. She was positioning herself to claim half of everything he owned, but she had no idea how little that actually was, according to the carefully constructed paper trail Marcus had been building. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if considering the proposal for the first time. That makes sense. I've been so focused on building the business that I haven't paid enough attention to our overall financial picture. Maybe you could help me organize everything. Elena's excitement was barely contained now. She'd expected to have to convince Marcus, maybe even argue with him about financial transparency. Instead, he was essentially offering to hand over complete access to their money. From her perspective, the conversation was going better than she could have hoped. I was thinking we could meet with a financial advisor after the holidays, Elena said, her voice taking on a business-like tone. Someone who could help us plan for the future, maybe look at investment opportunities or ways
to grow what we have. Marcus agreed enthusiastically, playing the part of a man grateful for his wife's financial acumen. They made tentative plans to research advisors and schedule meetings in January. Elena left the garage that evening believing she'd successfully manipulated her husband into cooperating with her plans. What Elena didn't know was that Marcus had spent the previous week meeting with his own financial advisors, cryptocurrency experts who specialized in asset protection and privacy. His millions in digital currency were now scattered across multiple platforms and wallets, protected by layers of encryption and legal structures that would be nearly impossible for Elena to discover or access. The bank accounts Elena would be given access to contained exactly what Marcus wanted her to see. His handyman business checking account held modest amounts that reflected a working man's income. Their joint savings showed the careful accumulation of a couple trying to build a nest egg on limited resources. To any financial advisor Elena might consult, Marcus would appear to be exactly what he claimed, a small business owner with more ambition than assets. The holidays passed in a surreal atmosphere of forced normalcy. Elena threw herself into Christmas preparations with an enthusiasm that seemed genuine until Marcus realized she was creating memories and traditions she could reference later when explaining why their divorce was so difficult. She insisted on expensive decorations they couldn't afford, elaborate meals that strained their budget, and gifts that demonstrated her generosity despite their supposed financial limitations. Marcus played along, grateful for the distraction of manual labor as he hung lights and assembled furniture.
Every purchase Elena made was charged to credit cards that would show up in their financial disclosure, evidence of a lifestyle that exceeded their apparent income. She was inadvertently building a case for the kind of financial irresponsibility that could work against her in divorce proceedings. Jake made several appearances during the holiday season, playing the role of devoted friend with an Oscar-worthy performance. He brought gifts for both of them, expressed concern about their financial stress, and even offered to help Marcus with some handyman jobs to bring in extra income. The irony was so thick, Marcus could taste it. On New Year's Eve, as they sat in their living room watching fireworks on television because they couldn't afford to go out, Elena made an announcement that confirmed everything Marcus had suspected about her timeline. "I want this to be the year we really figure things out," she said, her hand resting on his arm. "I want us to be honest with each other about everything, our fears, our dreams, our money situation. No more secrets." Marcus looked into his wife's eyes and saw a woman who had been lying to him for months, talking about honesty. Elena was preparing to demand complete financial transparency from him while hiding her affair with his best friend. The audacity was breathtaking. "No more secrets," Marcus agreed, his voice sincere. "I want that too." January brought the implementation of Elena's plan with military precision. She scheduled appointments with financial advisors, researched estate planning attorneys, and began organizing their paperwork with an efficiency that impressed Marcus, despite everything. Elena approached the dissolution of their marriage like a business project, complete with timelines and objectives. The first financial advisor meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in downtown Portland. Elena had chosen the advisor carefully, selecting someone who specialized in working with young couples planning for their future. She wanted an expert who would evaluate their assets professionally and provide documentation that could be used in legal proceedings. Marcus arrived at the meeting with a folder of carefully prepared documents. His tax returns showed modest income from his handyman business. His bank statements reflected the lifestyle of someone living paycheck to paycheck. His credit report indicated a man who paid his bills on time but had little excess income for investments or savings. Elena presented their information with the confidence of someone who believed she understood their complete financial picture. She spoke knowledgeably about their goals and concerns, positioning herself as the partner who took responsibility for their family's financial planning. The advisor listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that Elena answered with the precision of someone who had studied for this presentation. What emerged from the meeting was exactly what Elena had hoped for and exactly what Marcus had orchestrated. According to the professional assessment, their combined assets totaled approximately $43,000. Their debts, including credit cards and Marcus's business loan, reduced their net worth to roughly $18,000. Elena could expect to receive half of that amount, plus possibly some spousal support given Marcus's marginally higher income. Marcus watched Elena's face during the advisor's summary, looking for any sign that she understood how little money was actually at stake. But Elena remained focused and engaged, taking notes and asking about liquidation processes. She was planning her exit strategy around $9,000 and temporary support payments from a man whose business income barely covered their current expenses. After the meeting, Elena was energized in a way Marcus hadn't seen in months. She talked excitedly about implementing the advisor's suggestions, about organizing their financial records, and planning for their future. Her enthusiasm would have been touching if Marcus didn't know she was planning to destroy that future within weeks. The next phase of Elena's plan involved Jake more directly. Marcus first noticed the change during a weekend dinner at their favorite restaurant, a modest place they'd been going to since their early dating days. Elena had insisted on the dinner as a celebration of their new financial clarity, but her behavior throughout the meal suggested she was distracted by something more important than their conversation. Halfway through dinner, Elena excused herself to use the restroom, but Marcus noticed she took her phone with her. When she returned 15 minutes later, her cheeks were flushed and she seemed barely able to contain her excitement. She picked at her food while talking rapidly about work projects and weekend plans, her energy level completely inconsistent with their quiet restaurant setting. Marcus realized that Elena had used the bathroom break to call Jake, probably to update him on the financial advisor meeting and confirm their timeline for the next phase of their plan. The thought of his wife coordinating with his best friend while sitting across from him at dinner made Marcus's stomach turn, but he maintained his composure and played the role of loving husband. The following week brought confirmation of Marcus's suspicions when Jake called him directly. It was a casual call, the kind they'd been having for years, but this time Jake steered the conversation toward Marcus's marriage and financial situation with questions that felt rehearsed. "How are things going with Elena?" Jake asked, his tone carefully neutral. "She seemed a little stressed when I saw her last week." Marcus found himself analyzing every word of their conversation, looking for the subtext he now knew was there. Jake was fishing for information about their marriage, probably trying to determine whether Marcus suspected anything about the affair. More specifically, Jake seemed interested in Marcus's financial situation and whether the meeting with the advisor had revealed any hidden assets. "Things are good," Marcus replied, keeping his voice light. "We're working on some financial planning stuff, trying to get organized for the future. Elena's been really helpful with that." Jake's response was telling. He expressed surprise that they were working with a financial advisor, subtly questioning whether they could afford professional help. When Mark
Assured him they were keeping costs minimal and working with someone who offered reasonable rates, Jake seemed relieved. The conversation confirmed that Jake knew about Elena's financial investigation and was concerned about what she might discover. Marcus hung up from the call feeling sick. His best friend was actively participating in his wife's deception, helping her gather information that would be used against him. Jake wasn't just sleeping with Elena, he was helping her plan Marcus's financial destruction. February brought the acceleration Marcus had been expecting. Elena announced that she'd been offered a promotion at work that would require relocating to Seattle. The opportunity was too good to pass up, she explained, but it would mean difficult decisions about their future. She presented the information as a career dilemma rather than a relationship ultimatum. But Marcus could see the manipulation clearly now. Elena was giving him a choice: move to Seattle and continue their marriage under circumstances that would favor her, or stay in Portland and accept that their relationship was over. Either way, she would be positioning herself for the divorce she'd already decided to pursue. The promotion story was probably fictional, just another layer of deception to explain her eventual departure. Marcus responded with enthusiasm and support, praising Elena's career success and offering to research opportunities for his handyman business in Seattle. His response clearly frustrated Elena, who had expected resistance or at least reluctance about relocating. She'd crafted the promotion story to create conflict, not cooperation. Over the following days, Elena's story became more complex and contradictory. The promotion required immediate relocation, but also involved a probationary period that might not work out. The salary increase was substantial, but the cost of living in Seattle might offset the benefits. She seemed to be improvising new details every time Marcus asked questions about the opportunity. Marcus realized that Elena was struggling to maintain her narrative because she hadn't expected him to be supportive. Her plan required him to be resistant to change, selfish about his business, or unwilling to sacrifice for her career. Instead, his willingness to accommodate her supposed opportunity was forcing her to create increasingly elaborate reasons why the move might not work out. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening in late February. Elena had been on the phone for over an hour, supposedly discussing relocation details with her supervisor. But when she thought Marcus was in the garage, he heard her talking to someone in the intimate, affectionate tone he'd first noticed months earlier. This time, Marcus was close enough to hear actual words. Elena was talking about feeling guilty, about wishing they could just be honest about everything.
She mentioned counting down days until something would be finished, and she expressed frustration about having to maintain pretenses much longer. Marcus retreated to the garage before Elena finished her call, but he'd heard enough to understand that she was struggling with the emotional toll of her deception. Elena wasn't a natural manipulator. The constant lying and scheming was wearing on her. She wanted to end the charade and begin her new life with Jake, but something was preventing her from moving forward. The next morning brought clarification when Elena announced that the Seattle promotion had fallen through. The company had decided to hire someone with more experience, she explained, and she would be staying in her current position in Portland. Her relief at delivering this news was obvious, but she tried to frame it as disappointment over a missed opportunity. Marcus realized that Elena had never intended to move to Seattle. The promotion story had been a test, a way to gauge his reaction to major life changes and possibly create grounds for divorce based on irreconcilable differences about their future. When Marcus responded with support instead of resistance, Elena had to abandon that strategy and return to her original plan. March brought the final phase of Elena's deception. She began talking more frequently about their marriage, expressing concerns about their compatibility, and questioning whether they wanted the same things from life. Her approach was subtle, planting seeds of doubt rather than making direct accusations, but Marcus could see the end game clearly. Elena was preparing to ask for a divorce. She was building a narrative of growing apart, of fundamental incompatibilities that made their marriage unsustainable. When she finally served papers, she would point to months of conversations about their problems, positioning herself as someone who had tried everything before giving up. The conversations were particularly insidious because they contained elements of truth twisted to serve Elena's purposes. She talked about feeling disconnected from Marcus, which was accurate but ignored the fact that she'd been having an affair. She questioned their financial compatibility, which was reasonable, except that she was basing her concerns on deliberately hidden information about Marcus's true worth. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of participating in therapy sessions designed to document their marriage's failure, while knowing that his wife was sleeping with his best friend. Elena had scheduled couples counseling not to repair their relationship, but to create professional documentation of their problems. Every session became evidence for her eventual divorce filing. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, their therapist, was a skilled professional who specialized in helping couples navigate difficult transitions. She guided their conversations with expertise and compassion. But she had no way of knowing that one half of the couple was actively sabotaging the process. Elena participated in therapy like an actress playing a role, expressing vulnerability and commitment while privately planning her exit. Marcus found the therapy sessions helpful in unexpected ways. Sitting across from Elena while she performed concern for their marriage gave him insights into her personality he'd never noticed before. She was genuinely skilled at manipulation, able to express emotions that seemed authentic while serving her hidden agenda. The woman he'd married was far more calculating than he'd ever imagined. During one particularly revealing session, Dr. Hernandez asked them to discuss their individual goals for the future. Elena talked about wanting stability and security, about building a life with someone who shared her values and ambitions. The irony was overwhelming. Elena was describing her relationship with Jake while sitting next to the husband she was betraying, using therapy designed to save their marriage to articulate why she was leaving it. Marcus's response was more honest than anyone in the room realized. He talked about wanting to be with someone who was genuine, someone who valued honesty and loyalty above convenience or financial gain. He described his ideal partner as someone who would love him for who he was, rather than what he could provide. Every word was aimed at Elena, though she had no way of knowing it. April brought the culmination of Elena's plan and the beginning of Marcus's counterattack. Elena had been building toward divorce for months, laying groundwork and creating documentation, but she'd made one crucial miscalculation. She had assumed that Marcus was exactly who he appeared to be, a hardworking but financially limited handyman who would be easy to divorce and financially manageable to settle with.
The reality was that Elena was preparing to divorce one of the wealthiest men in Portland, someone whose hidden assets exceeded her wildest dreams of financial security. More importantly, she was about to discover that the man she'd been manipulating was far more intelligent and strategically minded than she had ever imagined. Marcus had spent months preparing for this moment. His cryptocurrency holdings were secure and hidden. His documentation of Elena's affair was comprehensive and legally admissible. His financial records showed exactly what he wanted Elena to see.
And nothing more. When she finally made her move, he would be ready with responses that would destroy her plans and leave her with far less than she'd calculated. The private investigator, Sarah Chen, had continued her surveillance throughout the winter and spring, building an increasingly detailed picture of Elena and Jake's relationship. Her latest report included evidence of apartment hunting, joint financial planning, and intimate conversations about their future together. Elena and Jake weren't just having an affair. They were planning a comprehensive life together, funded by Elena's divorce settlement from Marcus. But there was something else in Sarah's report that changed everything Marcus thought he knew about the situation. Elena and Jake had been discussing their concerns about Marcus's reaction to the divorce, specifically their worry that he might become suspicious or vindictive. They'd concluded that Marcus was too trusting and financially naive to cause them problems, but they were taking precautions just in case. Those precautions included Jake's plan to relocate his business to Seattle after Elena's divorce was finalized. They were preparing to leave Portland entirely, taking Elena's settlement money and starting fresh in a new city where they wouldn't have to worry about encountering Marcus or dealing with the aftermath of their betrayal. Marcus realized that Elena and Jake weren't just stealing his wife and attempting to steal his money. They were planning to disappear from his life entirely, leaving him alone in Portland while they built their dream life in Seattle with assets they thought belonged to him. The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking in its cruelty and calculation. That evening, as Marcus sat in his workshop surrounded by the tools of his trade, he made the decision that would define everything that followed. Elena wanted to play games with deception and financial manipulation. Jake wanted to help steal his best friend's life and disappear. They were about to discover that the man they'd underestimated had resources and determination they couldn't imagine. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Sarah Chen. It was time to move to the final phase of his own plan. Elena was preparing to serve him with divorce papers based on her assumptions about his finances and character. She was about to learn that sometimes the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating the person you're trying to destroy. The war Elena had started was about to become a battle she couldn't win. And Marcus intended to make sure she understood exactly how badly she'd miscalculated before it was over.
Seeking her fair share of a modest estate from a marriage that had simply run its course. There was nothing in the paperwork to suggest adultery, deception, or financial manipulation. Marcus finished reading the documents and set them aside with a smile that would have terrified Elena if she could have seen it. After months of playing the role of oblivious husband, he was finally free to drop the pretense and begin his counterattack. Elena thought she was divorcing a small-time handyman with limited resources and no legal sophistication. She was about to discover her mistake. The first call Marcus made was to his attorney, David Kim, a divorce specialist who had been quietly preparing for this moment since Marcus first hired him in February. David had reviewed all of Sarah Chen's surveillance evidence and had helped Marcus structure his financial affairs to maximum advantage. When the divorce papers arrived, David was ready to respond with devastating precision. "She's filed exactly as we predicted," Marcus told David over the phone. "Irreconcilable differences, requesting half of what she thinks our assets are worth." David's response was professional but tinged with anticipation.
Perfect. That gives us everything we need to proceed with our strategy. Her filing is based on incomplete financial information, and we have documentation proving she's been hiding a relationship that directly contradicts her claims about the marriage's deterioration. Marcus scheduled a meeting with David for that afternoon, but first, he had a more personal call to make. He dialed Jake's number knowing that his former best friend would be expecting to hear from him after Elena served the papers. Jake would want to gauge Marcus's emotional state and ensure that their plan was proceeding smoothly. Jake answered on the second ring, his voice carefully modulated to sound concerned, but not overly invested. "Marcus, hey man, how are you holding up?" Marcus let a note of defeat creep into his voice, playing the role Jake expected to hear. "I've been better. Elena served me with divorce papers this morning. I guess I knew it was coming, but seeing it in writing still hits hard." Jake's sympathies sounded genuine, which made his betrayal even more despicable. He offered to come over, suggested they grab a beer and talk through Marcus's feelings, and assured him that divorce wasn't the end of the world. Every word was calculated to maintain the fiction that Jake was a supportive friend rather than Elena's co-conspirator. "I keep thinking I should have seen this coming," Marcus said, injecting just enough vulnerability into his voice to sell the performance. "Were there signs I missed? Did Elena say anything to you about being unhappy?" Jake's pause was barely perceptible, but Marcus caught it. "She mentioned you guys were having some struggles, but I thought therapy might help work things out. I'm sorry it didn't." The conversation continued for 15 minutes, with Jake carefully gathering information about Marcus's legal plans and financial situation. Marcus fed him exactly the information he wanted Elena to receive: that Marcus was hiring a modest attorney, that he was worried about affording the legal fees, and that he was primarily concerned about keeping their house and his business tools. After hanging up, Marcus drove to David Kim's office with a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in months. The legal office was located in a gleaming downtown tower, its marble lobby and mahogany-paneled conference rooms a far cry from the modest spaces where Elena expected Marcus to meet with his attorney. David Kim wasn't a small-time lawyer struggling for clients. He was one of Portland's most successful family law practitioners, someone who specialized in high-asset divorces and complex financial litigation. David greeted Marcus with the confident handshake of someone who enjoyed winning difficult cases. They settled into David's corner office, which offered panoramic views of the Willamette River and the mountains beyond. The office was designed to impress and intimidate, filled with awards, legal texts, and photographs of David with impressive clients.
Prominent political figures. "Let's review what we have," David said, spreading Elena's divorce filing across his conference table. "Her petition is based on financial information that's incomplete and relationship claims that are demonstrably false. We're going to destroy both foundations of her case." David walked Marcus through their response strategy with the precision of a military commander planning an assault. First, they would file a comprehensive counter-petition that challenged every aspect of Elena's claims. Then they would request full financial discovery, forcing Elena to provide complete documentation of her assets and income. Finally, they would introduce evidence of Elena's adultery and deception, transforming the case from a simple divorce into a complex litigation involving fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. "The beautiful thing about her filing," David explained, "is that she's claimed the marriage deteriorated due to irreconcilable differences. When we prove she was having an affair throughout the period she claims you were growing apart, it undermines her entire narrative." Marcus reviewed the timeline David had prepared, correlating Elena's affair with her claims about their marriage. According to Elena's petition, their relationship had been deteriorating for over a year due to financial stress and incompatible life goals. But Sarah Chen's evidence showed that Elena's affair with Jake had begun 14 months ago, making her claims about the marriage's natural decline completely fraudulent. "What about the financial discovery?" Marcus asked. "When will Elena learn about my actual assets?" David smiled with the confidence of someone who enjoyed surprising opposing counsel. "We'll structure the revelation for maximum impact. First, we'll respond to her discovery requests with information about your cryptocurrency holdings and other investments. Her attorney will realize immediately that their entire case is based on false premises. Then, we'll demand explanations for why Elena failed to disclose complete financial information in her initial filing. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Elena had built her divorce case around assumptions about Marcus's limited wealth and her own moral superiority. When both assumptions proved false, her entire position would collapse. More importantly, her failure to disclose complete financial information could be interpreted as an attempt to defraud the court, potentially resulting in sanctions and attorney fee awards. Marcus left David's office feeling energized for the first time since discovering Elena's affair. For months, he'd been playing defense, gathering information and protecting his assets while pretending to be oblivious to his wife's betrayal. Now, he was moving to offense, using Elena's own deceptions against her in ways she couldn't anticipate or counter. That evening, Marcus arrived home to find Elena in an unusually good mood. She was cooking dinner with apparent enthusiasm, humming while she moved around the kitchen. When she saw Marcus, she offered a tentative smile that seemed genuine, despite everything he knew about her duplicity. "I know today was difficult," Elena said, her voice soft with what appeared to be real sympathy. "I want you to know that I don't hate you, Marcus. Sometimes people just grow apart, and there's nothing wrong with admitting that." Marcus marveled at Elena's ability to maintain her performance even after serving him with divorce papers. She was speaking to him with the kindness of someone ending a relationship amicably, as if her affair with Jake and her attempts to manipulate their finances were irrelevant details. The audacity was breathtaking. "I appreciate that," Marcus replied, keeping his voice neutral. "I want this to be as civil as possible, too. We both deserve to move on with our lives." Elena's relief was visible. She'd been worried about Marcus's reaction to the divorce filing, concerned that he might become angry or vindictive. His reasonable response suggested that their separation would proceed smoothly, allowing her to transition into her new life with Jake without
complications. Over dinner, Elena outlined her vision for their divorce process. She spoke about mediation rather than litigation, about working together to divide their assets fairly, and about maintaining a friendship after their marriage ended. Every suggestion was designed to keep Marcus cooperative and prevent him from hiring aggressive legal representation. Marcus nodded along with Elena's proposals while internally calculating how devastated she would be when she discovered the reality of their situation. Elena was planning a quiet, civilized divorce from a compliant husband with limited resources. Instead, she was about to face complex litigation against someone with the means to hire the best legal representation in the state. The next morning brought the first indication that Elena's plan wasn't proceeding as smoothly as she'd anticipated. Marcus's phone rang early, before 7 o'clock, and Elena's panicked voice greeted him when he answered. "Marcus, I think there's been some kind of mistake with the financial paperwork," Elena said, her usual composure replaced by confusion and concern. "My attorney received some documents that don't make sense." Marcus feigned sleepy confusion, asking Elena to explain what kind of documents and what seemed wrong about them. But he knew exactly what had happened. David Kim had filed their response to Elena's divorce petition overnight, including preliminary financial disclosures that revealed the existence of Marcus's cryptocurrency holdings. Elena's attorney had called her early that morning to discuss the unexpected revelation that her husband possessed assets worth several $1,000,000. The modest handyman she thought she was divorcing had suddenly become a high net worth, completely transforming the financial landscape of their divorce. "There must be some kind of error," Elena continued, her voice rising with stress. "The documents say you have millions of dollars in cryptocurrency. That can't be right, can it?" Marcus allowed himself a moment to savor Elena's confusion before responding with his own carefully crafted performance. He expressed surprise and concern, suggesting that perhaps there had been a clerical error or case mix-up. He offered to contact his attorney immediately to clarify the situation. "I'll call David right away," Marcus said, using his attorney's first name to suggest a casual relationship rather than a strategic partnership they'd actually developed. "There's obviously been some mistake in the paperwork." Elena accepted Marcus's explanation with desperate relief. The alternative, that her husband had been hiding millions of dollars throughout their marriage, was too devastating to consider. If Marcus was actually wealthy, her entire divorce strategy was not just wrong, but potentially criminal,
given her failure to disclose complete financial information. Marcus spent the day watching Elena spiral into increasingly frantic damage control. She made multiple calls to her attorney, demanding explanations and solutions for what she insisted was a paperwork error. She researched cryptocurrency online, trying to understand how someone could accumulate significant digital assets without leaving obvious traces. By evening, Elena's attorney had confirmed that the financial disclosures were accurate and complete. Marcus possessed cryptocurrency holdings worth approximately $4.2 million, accumulated through early investments and careful trading over several years. The modest lifestyle Elena had shared with him was a choice, not a necessity.
Cryptocurrency investments were made before their marriage and had been intended as long-term retirement planning. He expressed hurt that Elena was questioning his financial decisions during an already difficult time in their relationship. "I never hid anything from you," Marcus said, his voice steady and reasonable. "You never asked about my investments, and I didn't think they were relevant to our day-to-day life. I wanted us to live within our earned income, not rely on speculative investments for our lifestyle." Elena's response revealed the depth of her desperation. She accused Marcus of deliberately deceiving her about their financial situation, of making her believe they were poor when they could have been living comfortably. Her anger was genuine, but it was also strategic. If she could convince a court that Marcus had been financially deceptive, she might be able to argue for a larger settlement based on his breach of trust. The conversation escalated into their first real fight since Elena had filed for divorce. She demanded complete access to Marcus's financial records, insisted that his hidden wealth proved their marriage was based on lies, and threatened to pursue every available legal remedy if he didn't cooperate fully with her demands. Marcus let Elena's anger wash over him without responding in kind. He maintained his calm demeanor while she raged, occasionally offering reasonable responses that highlighted the irrationality of her demands. To any observer, he would appear to be the wronged party, trying to maintain civility while his wife attacked him for being successful. "I think we should let our attorneys handle the financial disclosure," Marcus said finally. "This is exactly why people hire professionals to manage these situations. We don't need to destroy what's left of our relationship by fighting about money." Elena's frustration was palpable. She'd expected Marcus to be defensive about his hidden wealth, to make mistakes she could exploit in court. Instead, he was responding with exactly the kind of reasonable cooperation that would make him appear sympathetic to a judge. Her attempts to portray him as deceptive were backfiring, making her seem grasping and unreasonable by comparison. The following week brought a series of revelations that completely dismantled Elena's divorce strategy. David Kim filed a comprehensive financial disclosure that revealed not just Marcus's cryptocurrency holdings, but also his sophisticated understanding of tax law, investment strategy, and asset protection. The man Elena thought was a simple handyman possessed an MBA from a prestigious university and had been managing complex financial portfolios for years. More devastating for Elena was the revelation that Marcus had maintained detailed records of all his financial activities throughout their marriage. Every cryptocurrency transaction was documented, every investment decision was logged, and every tax filing was meticulously prepared. There was no evidence of deception or hidden assets, just careful financial management by someone who understood how to build and protect wealth. Elena's attorney was forced to completely revise their legal strategy. Instead of seeking half of a modest estate, they were now claiming Elena's right to half of several $1,000,000. But their position was complicated by Elena's own failure to disclose complete financial information in her initial filing, and by the mounting evidence that her claims about the marriage's deterioration were false. The next blow came when David Kim filed a motion requesting sanctions against Elena for filing false financial information with the court. Elena's initial petition had claimed their total marital assets were worth $43,000, but the true value was more than 100 times that amount. Whether through ignorance or intent, Elena had provided the court with fundamentally false information about their case.
Elena's attorney tried to argue that the financial error was innocent, based on Elena's lack of knowledge about Marcus's investments. But David Kim countered with evidence that Elena had specifically requested financial consolidation.
Transparency from Marcus suggested she was aware that additional assets might exist. Her failure to investigate thoroughly before filing could be interpreted as willful ignorance designed to support false claims. The legal maneuvering accelerated through June and into July. Elena's initial strategy of quick, amicable divorce was replaced by complex litigation involving financial experts, forensic accountants, and extensive discovery. Every day brought new costs and new revelations that undermined Elena's position. The breakthrough Marcus had been waiting for came in late July when David Kim received Elena's responses to their discovery requests. Elena had been forced to provide complete financial records, including her bank statements, credit card transactions, and communication records. The documentation revealed a pattern of deception that extended far beyond her affair with Jake. Elena's financial records showed expenditures that didn't match her claimed activities: restaurant bills for two when she claimed to be working late alone, hotel charges during supposed business trips that her employer had no record of. Most damaging of all, Elena had been paying for expenses related to Jake's apartment, including utilities and groceries, suggesting a level of financial intermingling that contradicted her claims about the timeline of their relationship. David Kim used Elena's financial records to construct a detailed timeline of her affair with Jake. The evidence showed that their relationship had begun more than a year earlier and had involved financial planning for their future together. Elena hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been using marital resources to subsidize her affair and plan her exit strategy. The final devastating revelation came when David Kim subpoenaed Jake's financial records as part of their investigation into Elena's activities. Jake's records revealed that he and Elena had been apartment hunting together for months, had applied for joint credit cards, and had even consulted with a financial advisor about combining their resources after Elena's divorce was finalized. Marcus read through Jake's financial records with a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. His former best friend had been actively participating in Elena's deception, helping her plan their mutual betrayal down to the smallest financial detail. Jake hadn't just been sleeping with Marcus's wife, he'd been helping her strategize the destruction of Marcus's life. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Elena and Jake had been conducting a comprehensive affair that involved financial planning, emotional investment, and detailed preparation for their future together. Elena's claims about her marriage deteriorating naturally were completely false, and her failure to disclose the affair in her divorce filing was either perjury or gross negligence. In August, David Kim filed a motion for summary judgment that effectively ended Elena's ability to claim half of Marcus's assets. The motion documented Elena's adultery, her false financial disclosures, and her breach of fiduciary duty to the marriage. Instead of receiving millions in settlement, Elena was facing the possibility of paying Marcus's legal fees and receiving nothing from their divorce. Elena's attorney requested an emergency conference with David Kim to discuss settlement options. The conversation, which David Kim recorded with Elena's attorney's permission, revealed the complete collapse of Elena's position. She was willing to accept minimal spousal support, waive any claim to Marcus's assets, and pay her own legal fees if Marcus would agree not to pursue fraud charges related to her false financial disclosures. Marcus listened to the recording of the settlement conference with grim satisfaction. Elena had gone from expecting millions in divorce settlement to begging Marcus not to press criminal charges against her. Her attorney was essentially admitting that Elena had no viable legal position and was at Marcus's mercy for any resolution of their case. But Marcus wasn't interested in the quiet settlement that would allow Elena and Jake to disappear into their new life together.
Complete vindication and public acknowledgement of their betrayal. More importantly, he wanted to ensure that Elena faced consequences for her deception that would prevent her from attempting similar manipulation in the future. The trial was scheduled for September, giving both sides time to prepare their final arguments. Elena's attorney made several additional attempts to negotiate a settlement, each offer more desperate than the last. Elena was willing to give up everything, including her claim to their house and her share of Marcus's retirement accounts, if he would agree to resolve the case privately. Marcus declined every settlement offer, preferring to see the case through to its conclusion in court. He wanted a judge to hear the evidence, to understand the scope of Elena's deception, and to issue a ruling that would serve as public vindication of his position. After months of being manipulated and betrayed, Marcus wanted the truth to be officially recognized.
The trial lasted 3 days and was more devastating for Elena than Marcus had anticipated. David Kim presented their evidence methodically, building a case that portrayed Elena as a calculating manipulator who had betrayed her marriage vows, lied to the court, and attempted to defraud Marcus of millions of dollars. Elena's testimony was painful to watch. Under cross-examination, she was forced to admit to the affair with Jake, to acknowledge her false financial disclosures, and to explain her attempts to manipulate Marcus throughout their separation. Her attorney did his best to portray her as a confused woman who had made mistakes rather than a deliberate fraudster, but the evidence was too overwhelming to overcome. Jake was subpoenaed to testify about his role in Elena's deception. His testimony revealed the full scope of their betrayal, including their plans to relocate to Seattle using Elena's expected settlement money. Under oath, Jake was forced to admit that he had actively participated in Elena's attempts to gather information about Marcus's finances and had helped her plan their future together while she was still married. The judge's ruling was everything Marcus had hoped for and more. Elena's petition for divorce was granted, but she received nothing from the marital estate. Instead, she was ordered to pay Marcus's legal fees, which totaled over $200,000. The judge also referred Elena's case to the district attorney's office for possible prosecution for perjury and fraud. Elena left the courthouse that day facing financial ruin and potential criminal charges. Her affair with Jake had cost her everything she'd tried to gain and more. Instead of starting a new life with millions in settlement money, she was starting over with massive debt and a legal record that would follow her for years. Marcus walked out of the courthouse feeling vindicated but not victorious. He'd proven that Elena and Jake were calculating betrayers who had underestimated him completely. But the victory felt hollow. The woman he'd loved and the friend he'd trusted had revealed themselves to be capable of breathtaking deception and cruelty. The aftermath of the trial brought unexpected developments. Jake's business partners, horrified by the publicity surrounding his testimony, forced him out of their firm. Elena lost her job when her employer learned about the legal proceedings and decided they couldn't afford to be associated with someone facing potential criminal charges. Marcus received a letter from Elena 3 months after the trial, forwarded through David Kim's office. Elena was working as a waitress in Seattle, barely making enough money to pay her legal debt to Marcus. She expressed remorse for her deception and asked Marcus to consider reducing the financial judgment against her. Marcus read Elena's letter once and threw it away without responding. She'd made her choices and would live with the consequences. He felt no sympathy for someone who had tried to destroy his life based on the assumption that he was too naive and poor to fight back effectively.
Elena relocated to San Francisco. He'd been offered a position with a cryptocurrency investment firm that would allow him to drop the handyman pretense and work openly in his actual field of expertise. On his last day in Portland, Marcus drove past Jake's old apartment complex and the restaurant where he'd first suspected Elena's affair. The places that had once been sources of pain now felt like monuments to his own resilience and intelligence. He'd survived betrayal by people he trusted and emerged stronger and wiser. Marcus's story became a cautionary tale among his new colleagues in San Francisco. He would occasionally tell selected parts of it at industry conferences, always emphasizing the importance of protecting your assets and never underestimating the people around you. But he never told the complete story, never revealed the full extent of Elena and Jake's betrayal, or the thoroughness of his response. 2 years later, Marcus received a wedding announcement in the mail. Jake was marrying someone new, a woman Marcus didn't recognize. There was no return address, but the postmark was from a small town in Montana. Marcus assumed that Jake had finally left Seattle and Elena behind, starting over somewhere his reputation wouldn't follow him. Marcus never heard from Elena again. He occasionally wondered what had become of her, whether she'd managed to rebuild her life or if she was still paying the price for her deception. But the wondering was academic, like curiosity about a character in a book he'd finished reading long ago. The experience had taught Marcus valuable lessons about trust, deception, and the importance of protecting yourself from people who might underestimate your capabilities. He never again allowed anyone to have complete access to his financial information, and he never again pretended to be less successful than he actually was. In San Francisco, Marcus met someone new,
a financial analyst named Catherine, who appreciated his intelligence and shared his values about honesty and transparency. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than assumptions and deceptions. Marcus never told Catherine the complete story of his first marriage, but he was honest about having been divorced and about the importance he placed on financial independence and emotional honesty. Catherine understood and respected his boundaries, and their relationship flourished based on real communication rather than hidden agendas. 5 years after his divorce from Elena was finalized, Marcus was living the life he'd always wanted. His investment career was thriving, his relationship with Catherine was strong and honest, and he'd learned to trust his instincts about people's motivations and character. The handyman tools that had once been props in his deception were now housed in the garage of his new home in Marin County, used for weekend projects and occasional repairs. Marcus still enjoyed working with his hands, but now it was a hobby rather than a disguise. Sometimes when Marcus was working in his garage or walking along the San Francisco waterfront, he would think about Elena and Jake and wonder if they'd learned anything from their spectacular failure. Had they developed any insight into why their plan had backfired so completely, or did they still blame Marcus for being deceptive about his wealth? Marcus suspected that Elena and Jake had never understood their fundamental error. They'd assumed a quiet, modest man was weak and naive, that someone who worked with his hands couldn't also work with his mind. Their stereotypes and assumptions had blinded them to the reality of who Marcus actually was and what he was capable of achieving. The story became Marcus's reminder that people often reveal their true character when they think they have power over you. Elena and Jake had shown him exactly who they were when they believed he was helpless to resist their manipulation. Their betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been educational. Marcus never sought revenge beyond what the legal system provided, but he never allowed anyone to overlook that the two women had tried to trick him and the setup had backfired so completely.
Forgot the lessons Elena and Jake had taught him. Trust had to be earned through consistent actions over time. Financial information was a form of power that should be shared carefully. And sometimes the best protection against betrayal was allowing people to underestimate you until the moment you chose to reveal your true capabilities. The man who had once pretended to be a struggling handyman to protect his heart had learned that the heart could only be protected through wisdom, boundaries, and the courage to face truth, even when it was painful. Marcus had survived betrayal and emerged not just financially intact, but emotionally stronger and more self-aware. Elena and Jake had tried to steal his money and his future, but they'd inadvertently given him something more valuable: the knowledge that he could trust himself to recognize deception, protect his interests, and rebuild his life even after the most devastating betrayal. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.